in superficial soil near school daycare, then you must evaluate it for imminent and let's say and substantial hazards. If you have tetrachloroethylene in indoor air, if you have
But I think for substantial hazards, that would have to be a pretty long list. I'm not sure it would be a very helpful.
Yeah, that would be my question. Is if you then list the chemicals in the media but without the concentration, then
all the carcinogens.
Are you doing any more? Are you being more helpful at directing it more than just saying, look, if you have a contaminative concern in a media where people are being currently exposed,
You have to just
you need to have substantially.
Yeah.
And here are those conditions. If you then just have the conditions and the chemical without the concentration, I think the worst thing that could happen there is that you have some chemical that's not on the list, and people say, well, it's not on the list.
But you have a catch-all right now. So there's tons of chemicals that can pose an imminent hazard that are not on the trigger list now, and you have a catch-all statement right after that that says, or any other OHM that may pose, risk above an HQ of 10, da da da.
Yeah, but you don't need a laundry list for substantial hazard. I do think even for imminent hazard, one of the points of 321 was it was a narrow list because, and maybe there's a few other things to add to it, but it keeps it focused.
It doesn't even have it really.
If you have, but if you have a really long laundry list, you first of all, it loses its urgency because most of those don't pose imminent hazards under most situations.
Also, as I
also
recall,
think
it
the
was
substantial hazard, the way we're talking about it, it's basically going to be required to look at the substantial hazard for the data set that you're requiring. And, and I'll hark back to, what I've said for 20 years, which is this is a profession with people with professional judgment, and the point isn't for the NCP to be in front of.
Yeah, I also think that the list was limited to soil originally because the idea was, to help LSPs who didn't have a risk assessor, they just had soil data. That's usually what they have first, not water, not indoor air. So it was,
That's true. Well, so is the only list that we're talking about for this, that we're discussing as a potential new category of substantial hazards, is it only carcinogens? That, things that could pose a significant risk over even a shorter period of time? Because it seems like the non-cancer driven things, if they're still going to pose an imminent hazard, you're still going to pick them up.
Yeah, so I think I would go back to the statutory and regulatory definition, which are conditions that would pose significant risk if they were to exist for a short period of time versus for several years. So I think the cancer risk versus non-cancer risk is an easy shorthand way of saying, at least in the past, for cancer risk, we haven't been looking at a short period of time. So by definition, should they in fact be imminent hazards? Unless you're trying to account for a past exposure, so the uncertainty of how to actually evaluate short-term exposures for carcinogens, which would justify including imminent hazards. But you could have substantial hazards for non-cancer risk, and that number might be different from the imminent hazard for non-cancer risk.
So are you contemplating changing the time period for imminent hazards to something that's more analogous to the types of effects that?
Well, if we were to go down this path, I think the goal would be to define a time period for imminent hazards that would be a short period of time.
Okay. Then yes, I agree.
So one way of describing it would be really describing what a short period of time means for imminent hazard evaluations. And if you can't mathematically, toxicologically evaluate something for that short period of time, then, or it's appropriate to do it for that short period of time, it wouldn't be included in the
So if there was something that either only had chronic effects, would that be something you want to look at still?
As usual, the problems that we often run across is we may only have information about chronic events, which is not the same as saying it only has chronic effects.
No,
Right.
but, right.
So we would continue to have to provide guidance on how best to evaluate short-term exposures for chemicals with limited toxicological information.
And you'd have to change your model about how you thought about those. I mean, if it's a threshold carcinogen, what box does it go in? Maybe, or has mutagenic effects. I mean, there's a lot of subtleties that we don't capture in the current way that we do it. But it would be really hard. I could think of examples where I could put it in my imminent hazard box or my substantial hazard box, depending on whether it's being regulated in Massachusetts or regulated by, let's say, EPA. So it's not an easy task that you just mentioned. It's like, so naphthalene, EPA thinks it's a carcinogen. You know, we don't, right? So, you know, there's a lot of subtleties there that could change over time, that could make it really hard to put something in a particular box. If you categorically said, I'm worried about carcinogens, mutagens, and things that cause developmental effects, that's a good grouping. Yeah, and that's somewhat flexible. And those are what we're concerned about, right? I mean, primarily, that's
Well,
what we're concerned about.
So, some of the, like lead or, well, I guess
It's
that's
developmental.
developmental, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just wouldn't want to see the list of what we're concerned about, the list of our concerns narrowed by trying to create categories and put things into
It'd be hard
categories
to
and
do.
then having things fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
So is one paradigm that you simply keep the wording on imminent hazard the same, but change the time period over which the evaluation would occur? So instead of 5 years, look at a year or 2 weeks or 3 months? Yeah, I mean, is that really what we're maybe talking about here, is reducing it so that it actually is indicative of a short-term exposure?
Well, it won't matter for the non-cancer, right?
That's what I'm saying, that if you
Yeah.
still believe in the
Yeah.
one-hit model for some of the carcinogens
Yeah.
on the list, then that's going to be in that imminent hazard box. If you are adopting a SOAP factor based on threshold, then that's not going to be captured in your imminent hazard box.
No, because you'd still be, like, so for carcinogens, if you, let's say we changed it from 5 years to 3 months for the exposure period that you're gonna look at for.
A short period of time.
For a
I
short
totally
period
agree
of
with
time.
some short
4
period of
months,
time.
Right,
But
so-
it doesn't fall out into cancer, non-cancer.
No,
It's gonna be-
I'm saying
it's gonna be
run, I'm
blended.
not saying that. So I'm saying run both effects over that time period. Then it's really gonna be, you're gonna need a really, really high concentration of the carcinogens to trigger an IH. And so maybe that takes care of a lot of the concern by reducing the time period that we're looking at. You're not saying only look at non-cancer effects, you're still looking at both, but it's gonna have to be for, if it's something that's driven only by carcinogenic effects, it would have to be a very elevated concentration that you would want to take care of more quickly. So would that solve a lot of the agita?
Not sure if it would solve the one-hit issue.
Right, it doesn't do, like, if you shrink the short time, but you're concerned about a threshold carcinogen, then you're just sort of hiding it.
Well,
by
how's that,
shortening the time period.
how's that, well, I don't know,
I know,
is
would that
30
be-
days,
Would that be
right?
captured in a
5 years?
substantial hazard evaluation then?
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
what
so-
we-
so-
Yeah,
so
so
then
the
you're back to 5, so you
difficulty,
would- right.
yeah, so the not, like, for people that this may not be transparent to, for non-cancer risk estimates, it doesn't matter how long people
Right,
are
right.
exposed. If it's 5 years, 10 years, 2 minutes, you're gonna
The
get the
same
same
answer.
number. For cancer, the risk goes up and down depending how long the person is exposed. But so if you're talking about a threshold carcinogen, you don't, it's not the point that they were exposed for 3 years or not, it's that if they're exposed at all, then the risk is relevant and you're sort of hiding it by making the, just because of the way the math is done, you're hiding it by making the time shorter.
But we're talking about triggering accelerated response action. So for things that the goal is 0 for a threshold carcinogen, you know, what, that means if you have it, you want accelerated response
Well, and that
actions.
may address it, if it's a threshold carcinogen, it may not matter what the risk is, you just
Put it on the
notify.
list.
Yeah, it just goes on the list. That may be a way to address it.
You mean goes on the list at any concentration?
Or at some defined concentration that's not based on a site-specific risk assessment. Yeah.
Measurable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
that.
like the RC, like the RC, it could just be the RC that comes.
Okay, have we run out of steam?
We're tired.
I think.
I have.
I just want to.
Oh.
We're tired.
That's funny.
Okay, Bill, you can stay. You-
I like hanging out with risk assessors, all right? Very educational.
You're a sick man.
But that's a quantitative analysis that we're talking about. You know, there are qualitative analyses in fish kill, right? Imminent hazard. So if you're gonna quantify something, I like how many fish need to be killed before we have a fish kill. Public,
All of them.
public safety, you know, roadway spill, less than 10 gallons. 5 gallons, I've seen DEP, I signed it as a 2-hour notification and call it an imminent hazard due to that statement in the regs that basically say anything to public roadways, imminent hazard, slipping damage. 1 to 2 gallons, in my opinion, is going to be picked up in that day is not an imminent hazard. So it's kind of irritating to be into the system there. So if you quantify all these other things, I like to see you quantify how many fish need to be killed, how many gallons need to go on the roadway before an imminent hazard or a slipping hazard. So that's just an example of some of the quantitative things that we're dealing with, you know, that are clear in the regs, but it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So you know, once again, quantitative risk assessors. I'm not, I'm thinking qualitative.
Any other? You guys, you've been really quiet back there.
This kid.
You've at least been entertained.
This kid.
Yes.
You know, with risk assessors.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be
Okay, so
afraid
this
of
has
risk.
given us a lot to think about. So thank you. And so we're going to mull this over, and I think eventually we're going to probably come up with a proposal or not, or propose not to make any changes. Again, we're not promising anything, we're just trying to gather information at this point and different options.
Don't forget to sign if you want to be on the list.
And thank you for coming. Like I said, the highlight of my day.